going to talk to you about alternatives to using a Golden Dawn style open circle. Now, the idea is not to give you anything that might be part of your original group or your original teaching, but to look at stuff that would be best for people who are from different groups and different backgrounds come together, for instance, as in hand fastings, festivals, blessings for children, or just general celebrations. And therefore, being an open thing, the one thing I've got to say to begin with is it is not by any means a ritual for power or spells. It's essentially a ritual for those who wish to have a celebration. The first thing you've got to remember, of course, is that in anything like this, before we go into what it's about and what I'm doing, standards of behaviour. Each person should be given no doubt about the sort of behaviour you would expect in such a thing. They are guests at your sacred meeting, and as such, they are people who perhaps you should consider adults, people who will behave in the best way. But a quick rundown of a few rules is always best to start with. For instance, no shouting out, especially not if you're not meant to shout out. Keep yourself decorous. Do not try and muck around with other people or disrupt the meetings in any way, etc. You probably know exactly what I'm thinking about. Now, looking at the layout, circles come in many types. It's quite true that many cultures have a circle or a meeting, which normally, maybe through human nature, resolves itself into a circle around a centre. Because of that, you're able to come as one. Now, there are big circles, there are small circles. Slightly different things have to happen in both. You'll see why in a little while. It's quite funny, some of the stories. These circles have to be approached and set up. First thing I would say is, let's look at a few extra tips. Now, I found many years ago that one of the easiest ways of keeping people orderly, especially in hand fastings, is to have a collar. In other words, a person who stands aside from the ritual team in the centre and basically describes what's going on. It must be a person who really knows what they're talking about, knows about the ritual in a strong way, and who has a good sense of timing. Now, I found that one of the things is if you get hand fastings where there are guests who may have nothing at all to do with any pagan celebration, never been in one before, giving them a little bit of a talk or a little bit of a heads up about what's going to happen in the next stage is always worthwhile. Much more worthwhile than just leaving them to it and wondering what it's about. It certainly worked in my case in many occasions. One of the major problems, of course, is that you've got to get people into the site. Now, they can't just walk around and mill around and sort of stand there and wait for the whole thing to begin and wonder, oh, what's happening, what's going to be doing, why are these people doing this, what's it all about? Or you can have a proper parade. Get people into a line and have them spiral into the circle through a specific gateway. At that point, you can actually have incense and water and blessings all going. Once you're actually in the centre, of course, you make sure that they are properly distributed around the circle. A direction, well, there are good points. South is often a favoured one. You could say that, for instance, northeast is a traditional one. That's the actual direction of birth. I'll go into that a bit later as well. Another thing you can do is dance them in, or have musicians or drums playing at the same time throughout the whole of the entry period. Once you get into the centre, it's important that the main celebrant, whether it be a priestess, a priest, or someone, has a complete declaration of the intent of that ritual, so everybody knows exactly what they're saying. So the first thing, before you cast anything, before you go into circles or cubes or whatever, have someone stand up, called on by the caller on, who will tell you exactly what they're going to be doing. A declaration of intent. There are many people who are quite unfamiliar with pagan circles, who often go for the first time and want to know that things are going smooth. That will bring them back. That will give them something to do. Give them something to feel, oh, I've really been at something I really want to be at. I like this. And we are very friendly people who do like having new guests. Sometimes you can call them in with a horn. And sometimes you can actually use a calling in song or a calling in chant. Make it up yourself. Worry about it. It's an alternative to just having people wander in willy-nilly. I've seen ones where there's been really properly trained musicians in the centre, and once the music's going, it calms them down. I've seen others where they've had to use drumming circles. Well, the drumming circle itself, the idea of a load of people getting together to do a sacred drumming, that's actually a magical circle, whichever way you look at it. So one has to have a look and see what one is actually to do once one's in the circle. Now, as I say, it's going to be a celebratory one, often a seasonal one. Midsummer, big one. Beltane, even bigger at times. And this means it's going to be something to do with fun. One of the problems you've got, which I'm going to add on to, is that kids often come to these sort of celebrations. The problem is kids can get bored. I remember myself as a Catholic years ago, and I'm old enough to remember when the Mass was in Latin. This priest was spouting on a load of stuff, and I couldn't. Oh, it was a task, because there was nothing for a young person to do. We can often add children into the circle. But let's look at the casting of the circle first of all. Now, casting. What are you doing? You're declaring a sacred space. Great, lovely. Again, this is something that's gone through many, many years and many, many cultures. It wasn't all that big on the high magic side until Eliphas Levi started casting circles. Before that, the high magic thing being a Christian thing, where they were commanding demons to do their will. They would have to take these very dangerous beings and confine them, putting them into a circle or a protective circle around themselves. But we're not really talking about that. We want our gods and goddesses around. But when it comes to protection, it's something that we missed for a long time, which is the gods of protection. Now, there are a number of gods, but the one I tend to use is the old Druidic goddess Armenton or Nementonia, goddess of the protected grove. She also protects for all other sorts of magic. And if you ask her to be there, she will help you. You could also have the gods of place and the gods and spirits of that particular area, the traditions. So it's often worthwhile looking back at the traditions of a particular part of the world where you happen to be in and find what they're doing and then call on them. Makes for a good thing. But I always think humour is the most important thing as well, that you never make it pompous. There are other forms of circle casting. For instance, instead of having somebody running around with a sword, and I remember once in the hand fasting, we had a beautiful hand fasting. It was about nearly 100 people there, most of whom had nothing to do with the actual magic, but relatives. And the priestess, she was very good, but she'd just been bought by her husband, who was, by the way, the extremely good caller on at this. She'd just been bought this rather lovely sword, the one from the Lord of the Rings, from the elf in the Lord of the Rings, and she went belting round the circle, casting it. At which point you got very dignified old men and fat ladies diving for their lives out the way of this dirty great sword that was shooting around. It was quite funny, but I suppose it could have been quite scary as well. It's not the only way of doing it. You can, for instance, have everybody do a walk round. In other words, the whole circle is cast by everyone, and you can use a chant for that. The Mother of Darkness chant's one of the ones I feel best with. Or, alternately, you can have people turn round and call with their voices, either by calling a multiple tone, calling the gods, or by calling a particular set of words, but over and over again, building and building till the circle is very strong. There's also a number of things from the very interesting past. Now, I like step dancing. Not I'm very good at it, I'm not rubbish, but I do like the simple step dance when you're doing this. And you can do a simple step dance and music or a drum to help cast the circle. This is a second way or another way of casting the circle. Alternately, of course, there's a spiral dance. And this can be used to build the circle up using a chant such as spiraling in into the center, spiraling in into the heart, eventually ending up back at the circle again. It tends to build up things. So you're not doing just running around with the sword, because you can't run around with the sword. There are others that I've done. If anybody's been to my moving magic, they know that there's a circle casting which consists of each person, one after the other, racing around the circle mad, with everybody making a noise. That's great for kids. It shows them that there's more than just a boring thing going on. Whatever you do not need to use a standard circle cast. I found some of the most important and powerful ones being the voice ones. That can be very interesting, especially if you've got a large amount of people. One of the problems is that it tends to be harder to do coordinated stuff if you're moving around with a load of people. And if you're doing a big circle casting and you're using something like a sword or a wand to go around, it take you ages. It take you so long people get bored. You can, of course, have 4 or more people actually doing the casting together, each one doing a quarter. And that comes on to something else. But I'm going to go on to something quickly. It's one of my favourite castings, which is called the meditation casting. And this one, which is also very interesting for relatively small groups or intimate groups in a place that has limited space, or where you don't want it to make too much attention. In this one, think of yourself standing in your mind. You're on a plane and you face the north. You see the cold, the dark midnight. The sky is clear and bright stars pierce it, but it is dark blue. Cold, bright points, the stars punctuate this dark. There is a cold wind coming from what looks like a mass in front of you. Ground is dark. You can see only a big shadow. And the wheel turns, and the wheel turns, for it is winter. And as the wheel turns, so you turn. You turn from the north and slowly turn to the east. And as you do so, you notice that the sky starts to turn from the black to a navy blue to a bright blue. And as you continue to turn, you see the hollows beginning to light up, things lighting. The wind is not quite so bad as it was. Slowly you turn to the east. And there you see you're on a great cliff. And as you do so, the sun comes up in a yellow blaze on the horizon. There are towns and cities down there that you can see for miles, and people talking, people laughing. And the wheel turns and the wheel turns. The hollows fill up with light. Bees buzz. Flowers blossom and animals come out. And as it turns, you feel a hot breeze. And it comes eventually to the south. Just as the sun is rising to the zenith, a red-orange ball in the sky. You see the deep desert. The heat hits you. And the wheel turns and the wheel turns. And you hear, as the sun drops, water trickling down. You smell the salt of the sea. And the sun goes down. And as it goes down in the west, you come almost to a sea. The sun touches the sea and starts to go down, and you listen to the rhythms of the tides. And water trickles around you. The wheel turns and the wheel turns, and as it turns, the sun sinks. The sky darkens. The hollows fill up and the animals vanish. The bees vanish, the flowers go. And a cold draught hits your face. You feel the mass of the earth in front of you. For it is midnight and a new day has begun. Now, that's a very, very abbreviated one because we don't have time. The whole thing's usually done a bit more elaborately than that, if I can do it. The big problem, of course, is that with such a thing, you have to be sure of the people you're with. But circles can be cast in that way. They do not have to be cast in any formal magical way. It's not important. We then have to do other things. For instance, you may want to invoke some form of elemental quarter, you may not. But you may find, for instance, that the directions that we've got, which come from the Golden Dawn, are not the ones you need. Now, I used to know Fred Lamond years ago, and Fred told me, or did quite a few, quite campaign, one of his great sort of things was, why do we have always one element this fixed in one place? For instance, if you turn to the east and you find there's a dirty great lake or a river there, why not invoke water? If you turn to the south and see that in fact it's got a big mountain beside it, why do you have to invoke fire? You may find, for instance, that windmills are in the north. Why not invoke air? So moving things around is quite important. Doing things according to what you want. You may not want to use the elements. You may want to use something else. For instance, you can use titular gods. There are a number, and I think maybe you'll find that people who are of the northern tradition have their own customs in that. Whereas we, myself included, who have a more Scottish point of view, tend to like to use other things. You can, for instance, invoke the goddess Serona in the east, goddess Sula in the south, teardrop of the sun, Epona, the wild one, running through the land in the west, or perhaps Devona, or indeed one of the water gods or goddesses. And of course, Annie or Kaliach or one of the other earth goddesses wherever you're putting earth. Alternatively, if you're a Celt, you can use the 4 cities of the Tuatha. Now, they're great. W.G. Stewart has some superb books on this, or it's R.J. Stewart, sorry, which I recommend. And I recommend that you look at his adaptation of that. For instance, the city of Findas in the east. Findas has a poet. You don't have kings of the elements, you don't have angels. And he has a treasure. Treasure, often a spear. Or sometimes a sword, I mean, it depends. Boreas in the south, who has a poet called Isras. And they have a sword. Murias in the west with a cauldron. And Phalias in the north, which is earth. And that is often a drum. The centre is important. Another thing about casting quarters, there was a while ago a fashion, for instance, to, when working with quarters, don't work with quarters as such, work with eighths. That's interesting, because with the centre quarter, which is the centre, you've got 9, which is the second number. It's quite useful in many ways, because it allows you to take your time. The trouble is, it might mean you taking too much time. Now, time goes by. I haven't got much time for anything, so I have to move on. Calling the gods. Research your area. Know if there's a god form or a spirit form. Call on them. Look at the legends of the area. Call on that. See what there is. Often it's worthwhile, and this is especially true of the quarters, to do a children's one. Many years ago, we did one of these. And in the east, we had water pistols. No, sorry, bubbles. Or kites. We used bubbles that time. And we had all the kids blowing bubbles all over the place. In the south, we had sparklers, and we had kids running around all through the circle with sparklers. In the west, we had water pistols, and you can guess what they did with them. They had a great time shooting them at all the adults. And in the north, we took some grass seed. We made sure that we'd chosen an area where the north was in need of some more grass. And we had the kids stamping into the north, into that, the grass seeds. And this worked very well. Same with the rituals. We had a belting. We decided to do a battle of the flowers. Everybody had to take flowers. Kids loved it. So we have a maypole in the centre. Now we consecrated by belting each other with flowers. Flower heads would come off. Make sure you don't have any thorny flowers or flowers with woody stems, will hurt. And you end up with a whole carpet of flowers around you. And I thought, oh, great, I'm inventing this. Until I saw in a thing called the Tudor Farm, which was Ron Hutton was doing on telly. But apparently it was as old as the Stone Age, and that it was a big festival thing amongst the medieval farmers. Oh well, it's good to know that. So, alternative ways of doing it, not just doing it the way that you're meant to, not just keeping to the track. Then, of course, you come to things like, it's often worthwhile taking it down, taking it to the end. If you've called gods, thank them. If you've called spirits, thank them. Thank the goddess or god who guards your circle. And do it together. Now, this is a place where a spiral dance really comes into its own. But we can also have other dances for that as well. A farewell dance, which also uncasts the circle. if you do an uncasting. And finally, we need to look at how to get out of the circle. You could, for instance, have a spiral dance which ends up with you going out by the gateway that you created coming in. And once out, simply circling around outside. Please keep it important. Do not have people just walk away from a circle. Do not have them just, oh, that, thanks very much, cheerio. Try to make sure they socialise. You could put cakes and wine in there, but remember also, if you've got a big circle, it may take you hours to do it, so make sure there's 4 or 5 people doing it at once. Maybe have a blessing, but a blessing in each quarter. So there are different teams in each quarter blessing cakes and wine, or ale, or simply doing a wassail. If it's a smaller one, another good point is to have what I call a toast and boast. This we nicked from the Nordic tradition, but I like it. It's something that the English should be very embarrassed about. When I come out and say that my voice can thunder through the clouds and the waves shatter at my sheer glory and beauty, listen, yeah, sure. Ooh. But when you get to them, they don't know, they can't. The whole idea of toasting and boasting is to take the mickey out of yourself and take the mickey out of others and bring as much poetic bullshit as you possibly can into the circle. And finally, of course, thank and go. Now, I've said as much as I can in a limited time. It's a bit short, but at the same time, I've tried to show what I've done in the past. It's important to remember when you're dealing with any ritual, creativity, poetry, and sheer joy and love of life, along with laughter, are the greatest things you can do. It makes no difference if you're the highest magician or the lowest, newest. The person who can make the most bullshit, they make the ritual. As long as you remember to take mickey out of yourself as well. Don't just show that you're the greatest, because you aren't. But then neither are they. Get them to laugh. Laughter is perhaps the greatest thing in a ritual, especially a celebratory ritual. We once had a ritual many years ago where we had a fire sculpture in the middle of it. And we ran around and we invoked the gods. And then the fire sculpture went up and it was fantastic. We had about 400 people at that. But the thing about it was not invoking. I've been to Druid rituals where they invoke Golden Dawn style. I've been to Celtic rituals where they invoke Golden Dawn style. I've been to general rituals where they invoke Golden Dawn style. But you don't need to. What I would suggest to you and ask you if it's at all possible, please, please, please use your imagination. Try and do something that's different. Perhaps more fun. Thank you very much. I hope that's been worthwhile. If at any time you want to talk to me or question, please go through the Children of Artemis. If we manage to get another COA Witchfest, and I think personally I'm heavily optimistic that we will have a fantastic one, I will try and do something. I'm no longer really great on the moving magic, which was really, this was a part of, this was a follow-on from, because, well, I'm a bit on the old side for that, but I love to do it. So we can meet and chat. I would love to do that as well. Any questions? Address through them. Tam Campbell. Blessed be. May the Lord give you grace. Great peace of the billowing clouds to you. Great peace of the shining stars to you. Great peace of the rolling wave to you. Great peace of the quiet earth to you. great peace of the Mother of Peace to you. Merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again.